time when techno wasn't about instant gratification. It was about a state of mind, a sound that rewarded patience, unfolding over hours. Donato Dozzy, Mike Parker, Rose, Kyodor, Mod21, Anthony Linnell, Luigi Tozzi, artists that don't just play tracks but hold ceremonies. Labels like Semantica, Prologue, Hypnos, Edit Select and Northern Electronics carried the sound. But this music needs time, long sets, a lineup moving as one, a crowd willing to let go. And when those conditions align, the experience is beyond anything instant gratification can offer. More physical, more vibrant, more psychedelic, more intense. It's a sound I've always felt deeply connected to, not just as a listener, but also as a DJ and artist with releases on labels like Semantica or Edit Select. But around 2020, the landscape shifted. The pandemic hit, new listeners weren't socialized in clubs, but through social media and DJ streams, where sets were short, context was lost, and the deeper function of the sound faded into the background. When clubs reopened, promoters and festivals crammed in more headliners, set times shrank, and attention spans fragmented. Harder, faster, louder, techno leaned into instant impact. And while the hypnotic, slow-burning sound was pushed to the margins, it never truly disappeared. It adapted, found new spaces, and kept moving beneath the surface. And now it feels like something is shifting again. A new generation is rediscovering hypnotic depth, and hopefully clubs will create space again for long-term storytelling. So maybe it's time to take another look at this almost lost art of hypnotic techno. For a long time, my biggest challenge when it came to creating this music wasn't a lack of skill. It was not knowing which tools and techniques created the sounds I was after. But the moment I got my hands on a Buchla for the first time, it was almost too easy from day one. But it's not about the gear, it's about understanding the musical ideas behind it. And to prove this point, this beautiful, expensive sound that you just heard wasn't actually my Buchla. It was a recreation I built using free modules in the free version of VCV Rack, which you can download for free right now from the link in the description. And you could also use it to follow along with what I'm about to do on my Buchla system. By the way, if you're looking for a more affordable instrument than the Buchla, based on my experience with many synths, some of the best fits for this sound are the Make Noise O-Coast or Moog Labyrinth for West Coast style synthesis. The Make Noise Strega for abstract effects. Or the Moog DFAM for unique percussion. And I've also recorded a free sample pack featuring some of them, which you can also download for free from the description. By the way, if you want to dig deeper into this music, here are some good artists and labels to get you started. Alright, so now here we go with my actual Buchla system, which is maybe a bit more fun to look at for the sake of this demo. And yeah, what it does is actually pretty primitive and basic. You basically just have, in this case, 3 oscillators, which is the red section is one, the green section is one, and this blue card here is one. So only these 3 sections actually create sound, and all the rest is just to shape the sound in one way or another. And as you can see, I initialized everything to demonstrate that this works pretty much every time, first try, because it's just so easy to make these beautiful hypnotic techno loops with it. Because there's some ideas here that just are so fitting for this genre and just make it so easy and so fun. And I think one of those ideas is unquantized pitch. So pitches that are not on a regular keyboard, but maybe in between. Then polymeters. As you can see here, the sequencer, for example, it has just 5 steps, which is of course a bit weird compared to the 4-to-the-floor rhythm of most techno tracks, and it creates an interesting result. And then the third idea, I think, is different waveforms modulating each other and interacting in some interesting way. But now let's actually hear it. Here maybe the most basic of sounds, a sine wave, and what the Buchla can do with it now. For example, it could fold the sine wave to create some interesting overtones. And this is what it would look like. Creating additional overtones, making it brighter and more aggressive. Then there's also this green oscillator here, which can do a triangle wave or a square or a saw wave. And of course we can now cross-modulate them. For example, now we just hear the sine wave and now we start modulating it with the green oscillator. Now a triangle wave. And here I have a choice between AM and FM. AM is amplitude modulation, so it modulates the volume over time, and FM is frequency modulation. So it modulates the frequency over time. And here you just go by ear. Whatever sounds better in the moment is what's right. Yeah, and these are some of the ways to make the sound more complex. And then of course another color that we have to paint with is noise, which is also never to be underestimated. But now let's do an extremely simple patch maybe. As you can see, here's a 5-step sequencer. And one idea that's very basic is to use the sequencer to change the timbre of the sine wave over time. So I take a patch cable, a sequencer signal, it comes out of these blue jacks, these two. Because here everything is color coordinated. And now maybe let's turn it down a bit to be a bass sound. Yeah, and now over time this signal here actually controls the wave folding amount. And now, because we want to create interesting relationships between various sounds here, which Buchla is amazing at, let's maybe take this same sequence and use it for something else, like the pitch of the second oscillator. Yeah, which is lovely. Now let's give both of them an actual envelope so that it's not just full sustain all the time. Oh, now it's a bit more percussive and we can now shape the envelope here. As you can hear, actually, there's already some effects on the Buchla. I like to start with an effect chain already applied because it's just so much more inspiring to already have a beautiful sound. In my case, you can have a look here. It's just the Eventide Black Hole, which is going to get you very far in this genre as the ultimate deep techno reverb, I would say. And then the Replica XT as my delay of choice here in tape delay mode with a bit of wow and flutter and a bit of a mismatch between the left and right timing to get some stereo effects going. And that's it pretty much here. No other effects going. And of course also the Buchla has a spring built in. So here we have a bit of spring reverb as well. But it's very subtle right now. Alright, back to the sequence. Now we have this triangle wave, and there's an interesting relationship now, because whenever the wave folding is has a higher amount, the pitch also has a higher amount, and vice versa. But maybe we can tie these two sounds together even more and create an even more complex relationship between them. So maybe let's take another patch cable, take the audio from the first oscillator, the deep bass sound here, and patch it into the FM in of the triangle wave. And now we can FM modulate the first with the second. And now there's a much more complex even relationship between these two sounds. And this could already be a track. Yeah, you just add a kick drum and then you slowly turn this knob for 6 minutes while meditating. And maybe add some harmonics here as well on the oscillator. And maybe from time to time increase the wave holding. Yeah, and that's it already. It's already a tune. So now you get the idea of what I mean with creating interesting relationships between different oscillators, but maybe let's create a bit more complex patch now. So up next, let's have a look at this 1970s Soviet nuclear power plant looking sequencer, which is a multiple arbitrary function generator, model 248-1602. It's called the MARF in short. Shoutouts to Steffen from SA Modular, who built this for me. And what it does is it creates control voltage that we can use for whatever. So in order to sync it up, I'm going to take a clock signal from the 208C, put it here in the input, and now, because I already have all the right settings programmed here, it's now a slave to the clock of the 208, which means I can now take a signal from the voltage out and use it for whatever purposes. The most obvious one would be to control the pitch of the sine wave. And this is the next big idea that's going to get you very far that I learned way too late, which is that pitch-wise, you're not bound to the keys of a keyboard necessarily. Because here on the Moog, for example, you either play this note or you play this note or this. But if you think about it, there's an infinite number of possible notes just between these two notes. But we can never play them here, except for like pitch bends maybe and LFOs. But these infinite other notes, that's what the Buchla is for, and that's what this little sequencer is for, and this one, or the ones in some sort of software like VCV Rack, like the patch I gave you. And the beautiful thing about this already this combination of 4 pitches you likely never heard before and you will likely never hear again. And were I to do this, I probably couldn't precisely recreate it if I tried. No, you see? And it's really crazy because it's always involving some sort of novelty. Almost no matter what you do, it's beautiful. Maybe now let's take some random voltage, which is basically Buchla's version of sample and hold, and modulate the timbre over time. And now it already feels very alive. Now let's also take the random voltage and modulate the decay time. And now the notes have a different length. Beautiful. Now let's maybe take this exact same sequence of control voltage and use it to sequence this third oscillator here. And now I actually have to take the audio signal here, put it into the second channel. And to the Buchla nerds, yes, I know, this is not a Tiny Jacks cable, this is actually a regular Moog patch cable. I know it's wrong, but it actually works. Okay, now this is our second sequence, and now I just turn the pitch until it sounds right. Oh, and another idea that we already featured for a second here with the 5-step sequencer. Maybe let's not stick to this regular old 16-step pattern. Let's actually go in there and maybe say we want a 7-step pattern, because that's a more interesting pattern duration. So I just program this to be the last step, and now if we add a kick drum, again you're going to hear this polymeter effect. Yeah, because it's just so hypnotic, and it just makes it very easy to get lost in the sound if you can if you can't really tell where the one is, but in a satisfyingly disorienting way. Yeah, so weird, odd pattern durations are the way to go. And what I'm doing here right now is actually I'm using the same CV, but I'm using it inverted, because this here is basically an inverter. So whenever the pitch is high for this one, it's low for this one, and vice versa. But now there's not enough interaction for my taste. So maybe let's bring in the green oscillator as well here. Now it's modulating the red oscillator, but we could also take the same signal and use it to modulate the shape of the waveform of the third oscillator here. And now again there's a super complex relationship between these three oscillators. Alright, and now that we got that out of the way, maybe another interesting tool in your arsenal that you should never underestimate are beautiful filters. For example, this 291 is an analog bandpass filter. And let's see what happens if I take the sound from this card here, from the third oscillator, and instead of going directly into the second channel here, I first go into the 291. And now I can sculpt the sound really beautifully with this bandpass filter. And of course, in a sense, you're just removing frequencies. But by doing that, you're adding complexity to the sound, actually, even though you're removing something. Sort of like chiseling away at a block of marble. Because what's more complex, the block of marble or a beautiful sculpture? Yeah, now it really allows me to discover some new characteristics of this pattern. And maybe to demonstrate the actual power of this filter, maybe let's start out with just one pitch, actually. Yeah, this is now just one pitch. And this is what just the filter can do, and it already sounds like beautiful Northern Electronics release or whatever. And of course, another thing I could do is I could take, for example, this envelope and put it also into the filter. So now the filter actually has an envelope. And if you don't want to get into the Buchla stuff, here I prepared a little bit of an alternative approach using pretty much actually just Serum, which I think is a synth that most people have. And also Filter Freak by Soundtoys, but you could use any sine wave oscillator as well. But we'll get into that. Let's first have a listen here. That's what we're working with. And maybe let's start with the main sound here. I think the main theme is this one. It's a super simple idea. It's pretty much just a sine wave with a pitch envelope. So an envelope that controls the pitch of the sine wave over time. I mapped it here. So LFO1 to master tuning. And because I set it into re-trigger mode, it behaves like an envelope because it gets triggered every time a note hits. And this is the actual pattern it's playing. So literally just one note. And again, it's sort of like a polymeter. Because if it were aligned perfectly with the kick, see how boring it would sound? Yeah. So by giving it its own timing and pattern duration, much more interesting already. So yeah, just a sine wave going up in pitch. And if we have a look here on the spectrum, this is what it looks like. And this might look, it might sound fairly simple, but just a little bit here. The bass rising from bottom to top is gonna sound very powerful in a club. And actually I have a little bit of an EQ applied here, as you can see. Because this bit might even be too loud. Yeah, because our ears perceive higher frequencies louder than lower ones. So here I didn't want the volume to stay the same throughout the entire pitch envelope movement. And then, yeah, I picked another oscillator and I just tried out several different waveforms here until I found something I was happy with. And I think this sounds lovely. And the second LFO is free cycling, and it just moves the filter all the time in a subtle way. Yeah? So even if I don't touch anything, it still is going to have some movement. And then I sent out this entire track around that idea. I duplicated it. Same pattern here, just a higher note. And here I use different waveforms and a different filter, in this case a bandpass filter. But again, same setup here, yeah? Same pitch envelope and then free cycling LFO moving the filter, even if I don't move it, but I can move it additionally. And then I just did it a third time and it gave me a third sound, even higher. Yet again, bandpass filter that's slowly moving. Yeah? And I think here I also have this sine wave sound with unison, making it a bit stereo. And again, LFO moving the filter for me, and that's it. And then regarding the effects here, on the lowest version, I have a sidechain with a kick to get some pumping effect going. And on pretty much everything in this project, I have a little radiator, which is essentially preamp emulation of an analog preamp from a mixing desk. and I use it to distort everything in a subtle way, so everything sounds like it's going through an analog console. And you can find that, yeah, literally on every single track here in some way or another. And then on some of them I also have a auto panning, so that sound slightly moves from left to right. Then here I have a bit of preamp noise on its own on one channel, and a bit of tape noise because I'm too lazy to actually record it to tape right now. And this is really interesting what's happening here with these psychedelic pad sounds or whatever. So I stole this technique from R. Rose, who discussed this in the Art of Production feature for Resident Advisor. There's also a YouTube video regarding that. But essentially, what I did here is I have several sine waves slowly being modulated in pitch at different points in the frequency spectrum. And it gives this really beautiful hypnotic psychedelic effect, how they are running in and out of phase with each other. But how did I do it? Very easy. Let's just do it again. In this case here, I'm actually not even using an oscillator. I'm using a filter actually as an oscillator. In this case, Filter Freak by Sound Toys. And this filter is like an emulation of an analog filter, so it has some of the quirks of it, like noise and distortion already built into it. But essentially what happens if you crank up the resonance completely, it starts to self-oscillate. And now the filter frequency is basically the pitch control of our oscillator. And what I do then is I just pick a frequency that sounds good, and both of them, now I'm creating two sine waves, I put very close to each other, and to one of them here I've assigned an LFO that modulates the frequency. So now it's two sine waves that are always very close to each other in pitch, but sometimes they run in and out of phase, creating this psychoacoustic wobbly movement. Yeah, and that's it already. And then maybe a little bit of radiator on top, and on some of the tracks I also had a autopan. And because a steady autopan from left to right is maybe a bit boring, I also applied an LFO to the autopan. So now it's moving from left to right at varying speeds. Sometimes very quickly, so that it almost becomes an audible frequency, sometimes very slowly, but it's always moving. Yeah? And then I did this 4 times across the frequency spectrum, and this is what I ended up with. Oh, and the funny thing is, you can't even really stop it, because it's not tied to any sort of trigger or whatever, because these things are just self-oscillating. So even if I stop the project, the sine waves will just keep going indefinitely unless I re-record them to audio. Yeah. Then maybe let's have a look at the hi-hat. Just literally the stock 808 closed hi-hat from Ableton. And what I did here is I sent it into this send effect, E, which is just a reverb for the hi-hat. Let's listen to it in solo. Yeah, it just sounds like this. Just the hi-hat going in. And then a super aggressive sidechain from a kick. And now the attack time of this compressor lets me control the groove pretty much of the entire track. And now it just sounds a bit more interesting than had you just this hi-hat. It has a little bit more drive. And as you can see, I already mapped this to a MIDI controller here, some macros, because you could, of course, arrange this track just by creating automations with volumes and filters, and maybe that's even preferable depending on your workflow if you want it super precise. But a more fun way for sure would be to actually do a live performance now, where you just work with stuff like the filters here I've mapped to various poties and the volumes of the individual sine waves, volume of the kick, volume of the hi-hat, and volume of the second and third synth sound, and their respective cutoff frequencies for the filter. And then, yeah, you could start somewhere like this maybe. Or you could start already with the kick drum in, and then just bring all the sounds in until you reach some sort of climax, and then back out again over the course of a couple of minutes, and then go to track pretty much. Yeah, regarding the synths, I am using Black Hole by Eventide again. This delay I'm not actually using. Maybe this is interesting. I have another little radiator for distortion. And here I'm sending, I think, almost everything in. Just into this send effect to distort everything together fairly harshly, and then also compress it super harshly. And then just mix it in a bit so everything sounds like it went to some sort of chain together. And apart from that, here just subtle Black Hole, not too much, for a bit of room. And again, I think for the sine waves here also a bit of sidechain compression to get it grooving a bit with the kick, but not too much. Yeah, that's it. So now let's have a little jam. Aside from all of these technicalities, this music is about a certain kind of spirit, not just in how it unfolds, but also in how you listen. It's about letting repetition sink in, allowing space and surrendering to the process. In a world that moves faster and faster, the sound creates stillness. Another artist who truly embodies the spirit for me is Mod21, a true master of his craft with releases on Prologue, Semantica and Edit Select. And for me this is actually a bit of a full circle moment, because some years ago it was him who encouraged me to make videos for this channel, and that's how it all began. So to close things out, here's a beautiful live performance from his studio.